the decisions we make in developing our musical products and our concerts adding value that is truly useful to our stakeholders? And what I mean by that is our intended audiences. Will they remember what you did, how you did it, and how it set you apart? Hi, my name is Jeff Price, and I'm the host of Intentional Musicianship, where we talk about everything that leads to center stage, and that could be your storytelling, your showmanship, and your performance practice, and all points in between. And so the in-between is today we're going to talk about return on investment and expected value and how that shows up in our musical lives. Now, let me bridge this to me a little bit just to give you a perspective. Over the last couple of years, I've done this podcast, Intentional Musicianship. And I've had to make some decisions about return on investment as I've gone along. Over time, I've had to ask myself, what should I do myself? What should I hire out? What classes should I take? Should I purchase this membership or that membership? And at first, I purchased a little bit of everything. Could be editing, design, promotion, different community memberships, a lot of different classes. But after a couple years, I can really see that a lot of that wasn't sustainable, so I've sort of adjusted focus. Now, many of those items still have a lot of value, but I've had to look at what I've been doing and how it's impacting me, and I have to figure out, well, that class was great for the time I took it. It sharpened my skills. That membership was really great. It helped me connect to the community. Other things, I looked at them and I said, I can scale back on that. I can just use the free plan of that particular digital service. I can outsource when I don't have time to edit, or maybe I don't need to edit as precisely as I had in the past. When I made these choices and I've stopped different things, I realized that because of what I looked at with the return on investment for these things, that in the end, it didn't really change what I'm doing or the product that I'm giving. And as a musician, you sort of have to think about your return on investment decisions and how it's impacting you and where that leads you along your musical journey. And all these things are always personal, and what makes sense for one person at one time might not make sense for another. This year might be different than next year, depending on things like your goals, how they've shifted, the different resources you might have, the experiences that you might need to fill a critical gap in your learning. And so that brings us to our 4 points today. We're going to talk about return on investment, expected value, transformation, and then we're going to look at our stakeholders a little bit. So let's borrow that business concept of return on investment. We'll call it ROI. You'll hear it everywhere. So we've got time and money, blah, blah, blah. Let's see, how about this? Time and money and the energy that we put into something. And in the end, we're going to have something positive. Now, return on investment, most of the time, we're getting money back. Maybe we're getting time back. We're getting energy back. We're transforming something. We're getting real value out of something. And so as a musician, you got to look at a lot of different things. For example, you're getting ready to record something or you're getting ready for a concert. Does hiring that graphic designer for your recital poster or for your insert, does it make sense? Will it help your marketing? Did it help the audience grow? Did it really justify the cost? If you're taking a particular master class and you're having to travel and you're having to pay for it and it costs X amount of money, did it actually change your performance approach, or is it just a line that you added on your resume? It's just a bucket list thing. I can see this a lot with schools that people take. I need to go to this school and I have to do this degree, and then I have to go to this school and take with this teacher. And it's important to look at that return on investment, because in the end, it really is about you more than that magical pixie dust at the end of your journey. It takes a lot of hard work. I look at things like streaming services and things that we have and all the subscriptions that we have with software, Zoom, Calendly, websites, website design. It seems like everything is always coming up as a monthly expense. And you got to ask yourself, when you're doing all this stuff, does it expand your reach? Does it save you time? And it's really up to you to decide if it's worth it or not. So what I do is I keep a musical ROI ledger. It's just my budget. Call it something fancy. And maybe you don't like to keep an Excel spreadsheet, but I always have one running, and I check it a lot. I'm a very spreadsheet kind of person, and so I usually check it probably a week, 'cause I track all my expenses, but then I really dive in maybe once a month to see how things are going. And so over time, I have my annual expenses, I have my quarterly expenses, I have my monthly expenses, my weekly expenses, and things like that go into the musical side of the business. And so for you, depending on where you are and what you're doing, maybe once a semester after a big performance, list all your inputs, the costs, and then the outcome you actually got from it. And so you can sort of see if the value was really there. Not to be controversial, not to minimize anything, but you might find in the course of your musical journey that there were 4 different ways to get there. And they can all work really effectively. I know, for example, first master's degree, Northwestern University, paid a lot of money. Love my alma mater. It's great. It's way too expensive to go to nowadays. Second master's degree, HR. I just done a master's certificate at Villanova. Very expensive private school, wonderful school. But it's $10,000 cheaper to go to the school that I selected. And I looked at the bang and the buck in my time in life and what I was going to do with it. And I chose the cheaper school. Now, was the decision for the more expensive school a bad one? No. Just a different part of the journey that as you look at it, and depending on what you're going to get in and what you're going to get out, you might make them differently at different stages of your life, depending on what you were trying to do. So now that we've talked about how we invest our time and energy into various musical preparation or decisions with everything, let's talk about how that choice maybe plays out in the performance or creating the product that you're designing, whether digitally or in the classroom. And let's look at it through the lens of expected value. So when I think of expected value, I think of cards. Now, as a musician, touring around the country in the back of a bus, play a lot of hearts. Then we tried spades. I'm not a big fan of spades, but I know enough to be dangerous about playing spades. And once a year, I always watch the World Series of Poker. And if you watch it, they always have the ratios about who's going to win what hand based on the cards that people have. Because you know how many cards are in a deck, and you know the percentage of how many of each value were there. And as you see them on the table, you can see what's happening. And as people play their cards, not knowing different things that other people have, they can start developing these expected value, the probability of payoff with a particular hand. And you multiply that times the size of that payoff, and there you go. Is it a good bet? And we do this in business all the time. And every choice that we make to get us to stage impacts our audience in such a way that we can describe it as an expected value. When I think of playing hearts, like when we're playing and we're trying to run everything and not get stuck with the queen, those are the kind of things that we sort of know what people are playing. We've played many games. We know what's going to come out. And so we play a certain way. No matter what we do, that probability sometimes can bite us and we can be inaccurate with that. But we know it has a good probability. So Let's say something like communication. I love adding narration to a concert. We know it's going to increase audience engagement when we do that. And so let's say that the probability of that is 70%. Put some metrics to this. And we know that there's going to be a huge payoff possibility, a probability of the payoff. And it's 70%. So that's something that we might want to do because the size of the payoff is going to be 70% because we think it's going to happen. 7 out of 10 people should respond to this. That's going to be a high expected value. That's something we might want to do. In contrast, we might have to guard ourselves against something that might be a low expected value. You know, when you're playing different cards and different things, you can just think of the value of like, oh my gosh, I think I'm going to get that card, and then the wrong one comes up. So let's say you're programming and you have obscure music that's really complicated, maybe a modern piece of music, and depending on your audience, that might have a low probability of engaging that general audience. And so it might not be worth it because it might be such a low impact item that's not worth it as payoff for your concert that it might not be worth doing. Conversely, that same exact piece could have a very high expected payoff if you were playing for music specialists. So it still could be worth it in the right context. Think about people playing blackjack and they count cards, and I'm not smart enough mathematically to do that, but they know that there's going to be face cards coming and that they can bet more. And so in this case, we know if we have the right audience, we can put the right thing in front of the right people. So in the end, whatever you're doing, designing a course or programming something, a music, sort of assign what you're doing and the decisions you're making and assign that probability of impact of how this is going to make a big impact on your performance, that value of impact score at the end. And so it's sort of like when you're designing your practice session, you know, you get the biggest bang from doing this on a certain day or this before a concert. And you routinely get into that because you know that that roadmap of success works. So our third section, we're just sort of looking at how, and we've already looked at return on investment, we've looked at expected value, and we're trying to predict that potential impact of our choices. So now we're going to just sort of look at that transformational value of that and what people want to experience. Now, we've talked about this with the Kano model. We've talked about this with news articles. We've talked about things that what a customer might like. But in this case, we're going to look at this as a return on investment, expected value, and we're looking at it as transformation, as the real value that they get from something that you're doing. And so let's look at something from a musical conference. A lot of people in academia, music educators, we put in proposals to go to these state and national conventions. Now, I was fortunate this year. I went to the Ohio Music Educators and presented. I went to West Virginia Music Educators Association and I presented. And it was really a great experience for both of them. So when I did this, you're trying to figure out why those conferences and committees accept the proposals that they do. Well, they're the stakeholder, and based on what transformation that audience experiences from whatever you do is sort of like equal and commensurate to if they want to have you. So I always remember the Ohio Music Educators metric. It was a great one. And it said, our people do not like panel discussions. They want things that can be instantly placed in the classroom and make an instant impact. And so that's how I designed my proposal. And that's how I designed the title and the backup support, the slides, so that people could take that information and instantly work in the classroom to engage their students. Now, it's the same thing for concerts. When you're looking at transformation, real value of what you're doing, what's in it for them that way? So that return on investment just isn't money. You know, it could be you're looking for audience growth or loyalty, a memory that's long lasting for your customers. And what we're really looking at, as a committee member, will this workshop move teachers from confusion to clarity? Are they going to want to come back to this conference? Are they going to want to recommend this person? Always get the rating at the end about how you did at a particular conference. As an audience member, you're the one, well, did that concert shift that audience member? Did that shift them from a spectator to a fan? Are they a fan for life? If you can't articulate, why you're doing it and that before and after transformation of what someone's getting from your product, from your recital, from your proposal, from your performance, then you're probably not going to get invited back. You're going to struggle a little bit. In my final section, we're just sort of going to bring this all together and we're going to look at our perspective. And so from this side, we looked at ROI, expected value, and some transformational kind of stuff. But oftentimes we're looking at our personal growth, and we want to make sure that our products, our performances, the things that we do, we want to make sure that we have impacted others. And we want to look at how that value shows up for our stakeholders. Now, we're talking a little bit about this with Ohio music educators and how you're giving people value instantly they can take back in the classroom. But when you're creating something, every decision is for your stakeholders, that audience member, that committee. Could be that venue inviting you back. I have many episodes about how to effectively communicate and thank your sponsors and the venue that hosts you. Which, by the way, as an aside, just because I'm doing this live, gone to so many shows recently, and the people that don't do that and don't do that authentically just is a big no checkbox in inviting some of those people back. You're also thinking about those collaborators, and in the end, that return on investment means they get the benefit, not just you. And so ask yourself, when you made the decisions that you made to create your product or to perform that piece, perform that way, did it help others? Did it help the committee look good for inviting you? Did the audience leave with something memorable to talk about? Did the venue get the response that they were looking for? Did the people you were working with, the people to your left and right, the collaborators, feel valued? And did it help them grow professionally? After an event, I always like to do an after action. Of course, I was in the military. We did after actions all the time. What were we supposed to do? And did we do it? How could we do it better? Well, in the same way, we're going to do the same kind of thing with this. And we're going to describe what each stakeholder gets in return for your musical product. If you're an influencer and you're doing a digital product, what am I getting out of it? What's the real value? And probably to say, can it be proven? Do you have data to support that? If someone asks and looks at your reviews, it can answer the age-old question, is it worth it? Each of these four ideas, whether it be return on investment, expected value, transformation, and stakeholder benefit, they're like different lenses. I'm thinking about prisms, and you have the light that can be broken out to different things, but then it can focus in on any different area. And like a prism, we can get a clear picture of each individual part. But in the end, we take that out and we see the sunlight and we get that picture and we know what really matters and how it's impacted those other people. So as you sign up for that next class, product, service, or prepare for your next recital, that concert, that proposal, let's ask yourself, what's the return on investment of my choices? What decisions carry that highest expected value for your audience? We can also ask, can you clearly describe the transformation that the stakeholder will receive from your product? And, can you describe what happens before and after they're a member of your community, a member of your audience at your concert. And when you think about that return on investment, expected value, transformation, and that stakeholder, I think you're going to end up starting to create performances and products that not only satisfy you, but they also have a real lasting value to the people who matter most, which is the people in your community. I want to thank each of you for listening today, and you can always connect with us at intentionalmusicianship.com. I'd love to hear from each and every one of you. And if you like this episode, I hope you'll join us for the next episode, which will just be in 2 more weeks. Thanks, everybody. Talk to you later.